1893, slightly over 125 years ago, Swami Vivekananda, in front of a large diverse crowd, much like this, delivered an acclaimed speech. That event was the World Parliament of Religions, and Swamiji's special speech immediately shook the world and reverberates even today for its relevance and insight.
The speech offered an overview of Swamiji's faith and was an open call for unity despite of religion or differences.
We come together today to emulate those principles on the landmark 125th anniversary of his speech and hopefully understand a bit more about the workings of this great visionary and how we can contribute to this ideal.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Surendra.
And I am Aruhi.
And we will be your MCs for today. So, it is our genuine pleasure to be hosting this event, this magnanimous event today, proudly organized by Vivekanada Seva Sangh Singapore and the Ramakrishna Mission, and proudly supported by the Indian High Commission of India to Singapore.
To kick off the event, please join me in inviting the Secretary of Vivekanada Seva Sangh Singapore, Mr. Yashwardan Joshi, to give the welcome address. Yashwardan ji, please.
A very warm welcome to all of you for joining this event, and I think it's a magnificent morning that you all could make it and spare your time, although it's a Saturday morning. So although there is a vote of thanks at the end of the program, I take this opportunity to say a big thank you to all of you to spare your Saturday morning. Uttishtita Jagrata Prapya Varanni Bodhata. This was profound message of Kathopanishad that Swamiji had inspired millions with this thought, and to come out of darkness, ignorance and enlightened path of our society through his thoughts and teachings of life. The expansive canvas of Swami Vivekananda painted his thoughts cannot be looked through a narrow worldview. Right from his early youth, deep down in his heart, Swami Vivekananda had the pulsating energy of Sanatan Dharma, philosophy and the eternal values, the Indian ethos that we call it. He had the experience of seeing the things beyond the ordinary man. He was undoubtedly a brilliant scholar and a profound thinker. Vivekananda Seva Sangh Singapore is working in Singapore to spread Swami Vivekananda's message through weekly, monthly and annual activities, events, so that this message gets translated into the coming generations. One of the regular activity that Vivekananda Seva Sangha conducts is the family get-together across Singapore Island, where people come together as a family. They get values of Swami Vivekananda through physical, intellectual and spiritual development of all-rounded development is what we look for in those family get-together on the weekly basis. Another program that ITGF is now recognized with or associated with is the Indian Traditional Games Festival. ITGF, we know that and it has been a magnificent event as the years have passed. This year we had more than 2,000 to 3,000 people participating in the Indian Traditional Games Festival, and the adults who had played those traditional games in their childhood were nostalgic, while the next generation was able to connect to their heritage of the games and others. Similarly, into the field of intellectual and academics, VSS intends to conduct this kind of seminars and lecture series from the eminent and distinguished people to bring awareness about Swamiji's thoughts in the society. And what a better avenue could have been the 125th anniversary of Swamiji's speech in the Chicago, where he claimed first time the position the East should have claimed in the Western world and in a thundering way. So that we took that as an opportunity, and it will be an annual series of lectures to think about Swamiji's thoughts, to ponder upon his message, and then continue our year's journey. So that's how VSS has been working in Singapore. Similarly, Ramakrishna Mission has been working on the system of Vedanta, which combines both religion and philosophy of Hindus, especially as explained by Shri Ramakrishna, his wife's spiritual companion, Holy Mother Shri Sharda Devi, and his disciple Swami Vivekananda. Ramakrishna Mission Singapore is a branch of Ramakrishna Order of India, worldwide spiritual and welfare organization. So this program, on behalf of VSS and Ramakrishna Mission, I welcome you all and request the program to kickstart.
Thank you, Shri Arvindan. I'd like to take this opportunity to finally introduce our esteemed guests. First, we are going to shortly welcome the Indian High Commissioner to the Republic of Singapore, His Excellency Shri Jawed Ashraf. He is not here at the moment, but he will be joining us shortly. A career diplomat, High Commissioner Ashraf joined the Indian Foreign Service in 1999. He served in Frankfurt and Berlin from 1993 to 1999. He later worked in the Americas Division in New Delhi from 2004. He also completed a 3-year tenure as a councillor in Kathmandu up till 2007. From 2007 onwards, he served as the Councillor and Minister of Political Affairs in Washington DC and later headed the Ministry of External Affairs in New Delhi up to 2012.
High Commissioner Ashraf later served as Joint Secretary in the PMO's office under former Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh and Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi. His portfolio includes external affairs, defence, national security council, atomic energy and space. He returned to Ministry of External Affairs in January 2016 and was Joint Secretary until his appointment in Singapore. High Commissioner Ashraf studied economics at St. Stephen's College, New Delhi and management at master's level at the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. He recently published a coffee table book of his photographs, A Day in the Life of Kathmandu, dedicated to the victims of the Nepal earthquake of April 2015. His interests include tennis and trekking in the Himalayas, amongst others. We also have here with us Revered Swami Samchittananda. He joined the Ramakrishna Order in 1982 at its Allahabad Center. He came to Singapore in 2001 and served as Vice President. In 2016, he was sent to Argentina Center as its Vice President. He is now the President of Ramakrishna Mission Singapore since July this year. I request the Secretary of VSS, Mr. Yashwardhan Joshi, to felicitate Swami Samchittananda. Yashwardhan ji, please.
Our third honourable guest for today is Shri Arvindan Neelkandan, the co-author of the book Breaking India. He has been working for the past decade with an NGO in Tamil Nadu that serves marginalized rural communities in sustainable agriculture. He was awarded a joint research fellowship in cultural economics by India's Ministry of Tourism to research the economic potential of the ruins in Kanyakumari in southern Tamil Nadu.
These experiences provided him with in-depth knowledge of history and sociology. He is also a popular science writer in Tamil and a columnist with UPI Asia, a leading news portal. He is a part of the editorial team for highly popular Tamil web portal www.tamilhindu.com. He is also an author at Swarajit.mag and India Facts. I now request the Joint Secretary of VSS, Mr. Gurudhar Shenoy, to please felicitate Arvindan ji. Gurudhar ji, please.
Now I'm sure all of you are very excited to hear from our esteemed speakers and understand what insights they have for us. But before we kick off our event and go to the main segment of today's event, we would like to hear a beautiful rendition on Swami Vivekananda by one of our in-house speakers. So let us please hear, kick back and relax to hear a beautiful song on Swami Vivekananda.
भुवन मंडले नवयुग मुदयतु सदा विवेकानन्दमयं सुविवेकमयं स्वानन्दमयं भुवनमण्डले नवयुगमुदयतु सदा विवेकानन्दमयं सुविवेकमयं स्वानन्दमयं तमोमयं जनजीवनमधुना निष्क्रियकालस्य ग्रस्तम् रजोमयमिदं किं वा बहुधा क्रोधलोभमोहाविहितम् भक्ति ज्ञान कर्म विज्ञानै भक्ति ज्ञान कर्म विज्ञानै भवतु सात्विको ज्योतमयं भवतु सात्विको ज्योतमयं सदा विवेकानन्दमयं सुविवेकमयं स्वानन्दमयम् वह्निवायुजल बलविवर्धकं पांचभौतिकं विज्ञानम् सलिलनिधितलं गगनमण्डलं करतलफलमिव कुर्वाणम् दिक्षु विकीर्णं मनुजकुलमिदं दिक्षु विकीर्णं मनुजकुलमिदं घटयतु चैककुटुम्बमयं घटयतु चैककुटुम्बमयं सदा विवेकानन्दमयं सुविवेकमयं स्वानन्दमयम् सगुणाकारं रघुणाकारं एकाकारं अनेकारं भजन्ति ये ते भजन्तु देवं स्वस्थनिष्ठया विमत्सरम् विश्वधर्ममिम मुरारभावं विश्वधर्ममिम मुरारभावं प्रधर्वयतु सौहार्दमयं प्रधर्वयतु सौहार्दमयं सदा विवेकानन्दमयं सुविवेकमयं स्वानन्दमयम् जीवे जीवे शिवस्वरूपं सदा भावयतु सेवायाम् श्रीमदुर्जितं महामानवं समर्चयतु निजपूजायाम् चरतु मानवो यं सुहितकरं चरतु मानवो यं सुहितकरं धर्मं सेवा त्यागमयं धर्मं सेवा त्यागमयं सदा विवेकानन्दमयं सदा विवेकानन्दमयं भुवनमण्डले नवयुगमुदयतु सदा विवेकानन्दमयं सुविवेकमयं स्वानन्दमयम्
A truly mesmerizing song of Swami Vivekananda. Thank you, Rajiv ji.
Now that we know who our esteemed guests are, I would like to cover the different topics our panel will be taking over today. Our first speaker, Mr. Shri Arvindan Neelkandan, will share about the scientific thoughts on Swami Vivekananda and share some insight.
Our second speaker, the Revered Swami Samchittananda, will share about something closer to home and take us on a journey with Swami Vivekananda through Southeast Asia.
Our last speaker, His Excellency Shri Jawed Ashraf, who will be arriving later, will give his insight into the Swamiji's views on the Indian ethos and its relevance in today's society. I'm also pleased to announce that we have the President of Vivekanada Seva Sangh, Dr. Shri Bajrang ji with us here today. So,
Please note that we have reserved a slot at the end of our speaker session for an open Q&A session. We request all participants to kindly note their questions and hold them till the Q&A. Now, I'd like to call upon our first speaker, Shri Arvindan Neelkandan, to share with us the scientific thoughts of Swami Vivekananda. Arvindan ji, please.
Could I also invite the esteemed guests to take a seat downstairs so that they can have a better view of the slides.
My pronouns to all those who are assembled here. The most important thing that I have to start with is the fact that I am not an orator or a good speaker. I just write. So, if my talk turns out to be incohesive or something, please forgive me. Essentially, the talk is about Swami Vivekananda and his vision, particularly with respect to science. So what is science? Science is a way of understanding reality, like art. And in modern times, science has become the greatest force that decides, filters the way we view reality. The world views that emerge are essentially filtered by or even created by science. And so, a scientific approach to all aspects of human life vastly increases the quality of human life. At the same time, it also creates a lot of conflicts because there are competing forms of human processing of the data, and they create their own worldviews. Often these worldviews collide, particularly if the worldviews happen to be closed worldviews, and the problem is science is essentially an open worldview, and hence the science has the capacity to adapt and reinvent and reformulate its worldview like a kaleidoscopic pattern that readjusts itself. Whereas there are certain worldviews that become frozen, almost like fossilized. So sometimes this kind of a conflict becomes inevitable. Nevertheless, for humanity to proceed, there needs to be a harmony between the different processes that happen within the human psyche and which create these worldviews. And so, we will see what is the contribution of Swami Vivekananda to this particular aspect of the human evolution. Go to the first slide. Here we have two quotations of Swami Vivekananda, two passages, which are, I think, essentially these two passages provide a kind of a framework, the way in which we should approach science. Because science is not just doing science in a laboratory, it is not just for the science graduates, it is for all humanity. In one way or other, we have to use the process of science in our daily life. So here there are two passages. The first passage, here, the left side. Here you see that Swamiji makes a very wonderful statement. A statement that today the science is taken into account. Remember, when Swamiji made this statement, the Newtonian physics was at its most high. When you view reality, you have an objective reality, you have a subjective person who views that objective reality, and there is a difference. There is a mechanistic way of life, mechanistic view of the universe, and at the height of that, Swamiji makes this statement where he says that you take any of the hardest material science, go deeper and deeper into it, and you will see the matter becoming something ethereal. That the gross becomes the subtle, the physical becomes the metaphysical. When Swamiji made this statement, it should have looked like it is a beautiful flowery statement, but whether it really had any substance, people would have thought at that time, they would have questioned this particular passage. But now, with what you call the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics, and that happened decades after this particular passage was made. You know, the double slit experiment. At the very fundamental basis of reality, we know that it is a mixture of consciousness and the physical. What we consider as physical, at its very basic fundamental nature, is also decided by consciousness. Now, if you look at this particular statement from the view of Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics, the Schrödinger's cat and other things, then you will know that this is a prophetic statement essentially, made decades before. How a monk from India, which was supposed to be the dark backwaters of science and human civilization at that time by the colonial point of view, a monk makes such a statement. But even a bolder statement is on the right side, where he says that the method of science should be applied to religion. This is a very important thing. Because here he says, you apply whatever the process of science that has been applied to the external universe, you apply it to the internal universe. And whatever that emerges out of it, that will be the most pure thing. It is like the test of fire. It is this, applying the scientific process is the test of fire. Whatever enters into it and then what emerges out of it will be the purest of the religion. So interestingly, this too has become a reality today because you have today something called as the neurotheology. The brain scientists are today studying the neurobiology of religious experiences. You have Andrew Newberg, you have V.S. Ramachandran. They study what is the biological and the neurological basis of religion. And what is the need for this kind of religious experiences? You see the religious experience, not the religion with a small r. We are talking about the religion with a capital R. The need to connect to the universe. The need to feel a presence that dwarfs our all small presences. The need to expand and be one with the universe. This need is there, the experience is there, but this experience and this need, they have strong evolutionary roots, they have strong neurobiological basis. So ultimately what we see is that the method of science is getting applied to religion, and then whatever emerges out of that will be the religion that is universal. That religion will dwarf all the small religions that we invented at the cradle of when humanity was at its cradle. Now we will be able to understand religion as an experience. What Swami Ramakrishna Paramahamsa did in his life, he experimented with variety of religious experiences. And he understood that there are common denominators for all these religious experiences. Now, the scientists are trying to understand this. What is the evolutionary basis for this? And this will enrich the human cultures. It will make the humans understand that no particular religion, no particular culture is having monopoly for truth, but all are expressions of the same basic biocultural or neurological basis. That truth, out of which all these varieties manifest. So now, these two passages of Swami Vivekananda, they show that Swamiji had the ability to look into the future of science. Here is a monk coming from colonial India, and he has the ability to set the agenda for the science. Go to the next slide. And then next we will see how Swamiji dealt with one particular aspect of science. Many people thought that this particular, even now, there are people who can't reconcile with this particular aspect of science, evolution. Even today, there is conflict with people not being able to accept the truth of evolution. Now, there is also popular misconceptions about evolution, and one of the misconceptions is the one that you see in the left, that you see the small monkey slowly evolving in a linear way and ultimately becoming a Caucasian male. Always it is a Caucasian male. It ends with a Caucasian male, not even a female. And no other ways. Now, this is not what Darwin talked about. Darwin never said that we evolved from the apes. Darwin never said that the monkeys became humans. Essentially what Darwin said was that we all evolved from a common ancestor. So that makes us all apes. We didn't evolve from the apes, we are part of the primate family. Now that is what exactly Darwin said in his notes. You can see that. You can see that it is not a ladder, it is not some kind of a linear evolution, it is kind of a branching out of the tree. So this is the great revolution that actually Darwin brought. If you think of evolution like this particular thought has been there both in the East and in the West for a long time. Long before Darwin, even Aristotle has talked about a kind of a chain of beings that is in a linear ascendancy way and all that, from small ants to the last white European male. They saw it as one big linear staircase going up. But Darwin said no, we are essentially like branches from a tree. And so, each organism in its evolutionary scale is complete in itself. And this kind of keeping humans high above everything else, in terms of biological evolution, is something that Darwin never accepted. So this is something that we have to understand very clearly about evolution. We can go to the next slide. So, this is a very interesting statement that Darwin makes. It's almost poetic. You can just remove the word Darwin, and then if I am putting there something like Isopanishad, most of us would agree that this would be a statement that has come from Isopanishad. So he says that there is one living spirit that is prevalent over this world and which assumes the multiple forms. So the one becoming the many. And one mechanism or one process that gives way to different forms is something that Darwin talked about. That is why when J.B.S. Haldane, the greatest neo-Darwinist, when he was giving a talk, he said that with Darwin's idea, Darwin converted it, told half jokingly and half seriously. With the idea of Darwin, Darwin converted the entire European intelligentsia to Hinduism. Because this is one worldview that accepted evolution. That the 6 darshanas, most of the 6 darshanas, they accept evolution. The Sankhya accepts evolution. In fact, the entire basis of the Sankhya darshana is evolution. So, of course, there is this misconception also that the Dasavataras represent evolution. Dasavatara does not represent evolution essentially. But the Sankhya darshana essentially is based on evolution. So, over the Sankhya darshana, you have the Vedanta. Naturally, Vedanta also accepts evolution. Go to the next slide. So here is what Swami Vivekananda says, and this is the most interesting observation that Swami Vivekananda has. That evolution has to be seen at 2 levels. The one level, you have the biological evolution, where the instinct prevails, where you can talk about the competition, you can talk about one species eliminating the other, the so-called survival of the fittest, might is right and all that. But then comes the humanity. When the humanity comes, so essentially here he talks about the entire evolution being coming from one space. But Swami Vivekananda saw evolution at 2 levels. One is from the biological level. With the biological level, it is the instinctual evolution, where there is a lot of competition and bloodshed and everything. But when the humanity comes, or when a self-aware species. So at that time, human species alone was considered as the self-aware species. So the Swamiji used the term the humans. Now we can tell self-aware species because you also know that the chimpanzees are self-aware. We also now know that to a large extent the mountain gorillas are self-aware, dolphins are self-aware. So once the self-aware species comes into being, then the nature of evolution changes. Go to the next slide. But there is this notion called survival of the fittest. The term was introduced by Herbert Spencer, not by Darwin himself. And this gave rise to social Darwinism. Now what social Darwinism did was it justified all sorts of social injustice. Racism, exploitation, economic exploitation, imperialism, colonialism, everything was justified on the basis of Darwinian evolution. So the weak should be exploited by the strong people. So that is social Darwinism. And a vast section of Western intelligentsia embraced social Darwinism because it was profitable. The most interesting part is that even Karl Marx, he was for some kind of social Darwinism with Eurocentrism. At the same time, here is the interesting part, Darwin never accepted social Darwinism. Darwin was very clear that his natural selection is one of the many processes of evolution, and it happens in just because it happens in the animal world, you need not extend it to the human world. The same way. So here comes Swamiji's next quotation. So here he says that very clearly, the competition need not be the basis for human evolution. In the case of human evolution, things can get reversed. He gives a very beautiful example of a big tree standing in the banks of a pond, and you see the reflection. It is completely reversed. The same way, the evolutionary process that you see in the animal kingdom can be reversed in the self-aware species. So here you can have cooperation, here you have the rational mind instead of the instincts, and here it is the rules of the mind that govern evolution. So from the geosphere you come to the biosphere, and from the biosphere you go to another sphere. Swami Vivekananda lays the foundation for this new kind of evolution. So he clearly rejects social Darwinism. He accepts evolution. He rejects social Darwinism. And he says the next stage of evolution is going to be something qualitatively different. And what is that? If you look at the real science thinkers who thought about the future of evolution, I'm not talking about the mystics, the real science thinkers who thought about the future of evolution, they have resonated with the Swamiji's idea. Go to the next slide. Yeah, here he says, and again, when we are talking about the mind, this is a very important vision of Swami Vivekananda. The mind he sees not as something that is different from the matter. Now, this is very interesting because in the Aristotelian basis of science, the entire Western science, in a way, is based on the Aristotelian philosophy. Fortunately, here in India, we have 6 forms of darshanas. So you can always move from one darshana to another. That is a kind of what you can call epistemological pluralism. So you can shift from one to another, which increases the way in which you look at the reality. It opens up the gateways of reality in different ways. Through different windows, different shaped windows, you can approach reality. So that is one aspect. Now, in Aristotelian view, the mind is different and the matter is different. The same thing even comes to Descartes. So in Cartesian philosophy, you have the mind is different and the matter is different. They are entirely two different things. Swamiji never accepted this. Now, mind and matter, they form a continuum. They are not two different categories. They form a continuum. So here, what you see is that when the mind starts controlling when the mind takes over the evolution, you have to see a continuum with the biosphere. It is not something that is cut off from the biosphere, but it brings a qualitative change with the roots in biosphere. That is very important. So this particular passage of Swami Vivekananda, you have to remember when we go to the next part. Go to the next one. So one of the earliest critics of social Darwinism was Peter Kropotkin, who was actually considered an anarchist at that time. He was a prince from Russia. He had interest in socialism and all that. And this person, Kropotkin, he met Swami Vivekananda in the Paris exhibition. When Swami Vivekananda came to Paris Science Exhibition, where he met this person, Kropotkin. He came along with Sister Nivedita, where he met another great scientist, Jagadish Chandra Bose. So all these people talked together. Later you can see how these ideas have evolved. So the next person whom you are seeing here is Vernadsky. His full name is Vladimir Ivanovich Vernadsky. He used to system sciences. Today you have a lot of system sciences, like for example, Gaia hypothesis. You have, for a long time science considered geology as some separate thing and biology as a separate thing. And Vernadsky was the first person to argue that the life is an important geological force that is changing the planet through the ages. So Vernadsky used to systems science what Albert Einstein is to physics or Darwin is to biology. Now, Vernadsky popularized a particular word, noosphere. So from the geosphere you come to the biosphere, from the biosphere you go to the noosphere. Noosphere is the sphere of the mind. That is the next level of evolution. Now you see the entire, say for example you look at Singapore. You see there's a lot of changes in the way the geological cycles happen here. And why these changes have come here is because of the humans and because of the human thought process. And so the human thought processes have evolved to a significant geological force, the planet. So he said that the values, everything associated with our mind, our worldview, everything now, they have an impact on the geological cycles of the planet. So our thought processes have become the next sphere that is enveloping the earth. Now that is the noosphere. So Vladimir Ivanovich Vernadsky, he introduced this term noosphere and it became very popular. In fact, the word itself was coined by a Jesuit anthropologist, Charles D. Chardin, a French Jesuit anthropologist. But he was prohibited by the church to write anything more, and all his works were published after his death. But the term was taken in a very scientific way and popularized among the science literature by Vernadsky. Go to the next slide. So that is one person. Now you understand. You have to have this in mind. The noosphere, from biosphere you move to the noosphere, and then there's Julian Huxley. In 1959 to 60, that is in 1859, the Origin of Species was published, so 100 years. And there was a centenary talk. At that time, Julian Huxley talked about the psychosocial evolution. So since now we have got only the biological evolution, now you have the psychosocial evolution. And he also talked about the psychosocial sciences, and then he said, defined the psychosocial sciences as the science of human possibilities. This is something very similar to what Swami Vivekananda talked about. And then you have the next person, is Jonas Salk, who actually was the pioneer in inventing that polio vaccine. And he talked about metabiological evolution. So since now you have got the biological evolution and now you have the metabiological evolution. So you have these three important pioneers in science. They are visionaries, not just some discoverers alone. They are visionaries and thinkers, and they talk about the next stage of evolution. So you have from biosphere you move to the noosphere. From ordinary biological evolution you move to the psychosocial evolution. And from biological evolution you go to metabiological evolution. In all this, they emphasized something, that it is the inner evolution of the human species, or the self-aware species. The inner evolution of the species is what is very important. So, once this kind of a thought in evolutionary studies comes, it gives a great impetus to understand our inner processes. Here is where Swami Vivekananda becomes very relevant. If you go through his entire Vedanta lectures, if you go through his entire clarion call to our nation, you find one thing very important, is that he takes the evolutionary framework and fixes our national resurgence into that evolutionary framework. And he points out that ultimately we have to become a big global family, a big universal family. And to attain that, you have to do it through religion. Again, religion not in a small, conventional way. This religion is the religion that Stephen Hawking talks about, something that breathes fire into the equations. It is not a personal God. It is not a particular deity. It is the impersonal Godhead. So, it is this impersonal Godhead that we all want to realize. Swamiji talked about that. And to do this, he said again and again, essentially it is to realize the divinity within. He talked about this. To realize the divinity within, you go beyond the diversities and you seek the unity. That is what he again and again emphasized, particularly in terms of science. He said that what is the purpose of all chemistry? It is to find the basic principles, the basic common principles. In fact, if you take the entire Mendeleev periodic table, what is the purpose of entire Mendeleev's periodic table? It is to find what is common between all these diverse elements. And ultimately, what you do is you find out that all chemical reactions are oxidations and reductions, which is loss of electrons or gain of electrons. But at the same time, you don't lose the vision of the beauty, of the diversity of the chemical reactions. So this is a very interesting thing, because ultimately in chemistry you want to reduce everything down to the level of electrons, but at the same time you also don't want to lose the beauty of the multiplicity of the phenomenon this simple reduction brings. Now this is the beauty of entire humanity. That is what Swami Vivekananda said. He said that all religion can be ultimately reduced to seeking of the divine within, realize the divine within. At the same time, it can create a lot of multiplicity and lot of diversity. So I don't want a particular religion to die and my religion to live. I don't want a particular person to get converted to my religion or my person to get converted to another religion. I just want you to be in your own religion, in your own path, at the same time seek the truth. Seek the truth without any inhibition. That alone is needed. For that, you have a lot of self-confidence. Now, this is the vision of Swami Vivekananda, where he brought the clarity of scientific vision to your own inner phenomenon. And this expresses again back as what I would call the psychology of scientific discovery. We always talk about scientific temper in India. I don't know how much time we have. Right? How much time we have? So we always talk in India about scientific temper. Scientific temper was a particular term that was coined by, unfortunately not Jawaharlal Nehru. Jawaharlal Nehru popularized it. The term was coined by Bertrand Russell. So Bertrand Russell coined this particular term in the context of medieval Europe giving way to enlightenment. There was of course a clash between the institutional religion and science at that time. He coined that particular term in that context. But in India, we have to go beyond this scientific problem. We have to go to the discovery of the psychology of the discovery. This is a term I got from the interview of George Sudarshan, one of the greatest physicists. We just lost him this year. He died this year. He is one of the greatest physicists. And he says, he takes a Vishnu Sahasranama. The first word, name is Viswa. So he says the entire universe is Vishnu. And when I go and study the matter, I realize that the matter is not exactly matter. The matter is something in which my own consciousness also gets added up. And what is the naive realism, what we call the naive reality, gives way to subtle reality. And when you discover that, he says this specifically, when I discover that, I feel your oneness with the entire universe. I may then again come back from it. But getting into that particular thing, particular state of consciousness during the discovery. That is almost Advaitic. So this psychology of discovery, what prompts a student, what will prompt a student towards this discovery of oneness in any field he chooses. The field may be playing football, the field may be studying the scripture, the field may be working in the chemistry lab, whatever it is, putting into the child that fire to seek that oneness. That is what education is. And that is the vision Swami Vivekananda gave us. And to get that vision into our educational systems. Once we do that, ultimately Swami Vivekananda's science is the science of education. The science of education which will make our children, our next generation, in fact it should have made us also into greatest benefactors of humanity. People who enrich this planet with the music when they leave this planet. That is what Swami Vivekananda wanted us to be. Perhaps we missed the bus, one generation we missed the bus for whatever reason. We should put this fire into our education system again. And that will be the greatest Anjali that we give to Swami Vivekananda. Thank you.
Thank you for that really informative speech and for shedding light on the scientific thoughts and aspects of Swami Vivekananda. Now, I'd like to request Swami Samchittananda to tell us more about Swamiji's journey through Southeast Asia. Swamiji, please.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, friends and devotees, I think between two intellectual talks, a relatively lighter subject, but it will show us the other dimension of Swamiji, and we shall go through this journey which he started for the participating in the Parliament of World Religion. The lectures and talks are delivered since time immemorial. Most of the lectures and oratory skills were given by the great leaders, mainly the political leaders and social leaders and those who are motivators to the people. Many of them are now the part of the big literature, part of the museums and libraries. We have not heard before that a person delivered a lecture and after 125 years people want to celebrate his lecture. Because people talk always for the sake of their group, their sex, their religion, their country, and they are correct in their own place. But here was a man who worried for the most lovable object of his life, the man, the human being. And he spoke from that point of view. Many times people read his famous lectures, which all of you have in your hand, in the goodie bag, that he represented Hinduism. Of course, during the Parliament of Religion, there is one paper on Hinduism, but the rest of his lectures are his effort to mend the mind of the people. He stayed about more than 4 years in Europe and America. And his effort was to redefine the way of thinking itself. Just now we heard, I have read Swamiji's quotations and literature which Mr. Arvindan just presented to us. But because of the lack of knowledge of science, I could not correlate with how the scientific discoveries have made regarding the three streams of science and also in the field of consciousness. So Swamiji tried to change the psyche of the intellectuals. I just remember something to add on to what he said. It is about 125 years before. Nobody knew. Electricity itself was a new invention at that time. During the World Parliament of Religion, the Columbian Exposition, there was a separate enclave where the wonders of electricity, how the electrical power can be used. It looks very naive in front of us when we talk about those concepts today. But think of at the same time, when we discovered electricity, here was a man, as he said, coming from India. He says, all big cables which you use to transport electricity is not necessary actually. And it is after 120 years that we have a concept of wireless electricity. How he could have imagined? There is a beautiful book you can find called Swami Vivekananda, an intuitive scientist. He didn't practice science in the laboratories, but he has a science in his brain, in his heart, that how the spiritual truths are manifested. Anyway, so here we are celebrating a speech of a person. He spoke something which has changed the mind of millions. It has changed the mind of the world leaders. In a way, he did not speak anything new. The truth is always the same. And the truth has been reflected in Vedas in one way and in the modern way by Swami Vivekananda. In between, a huge ocean of literature given by another great visionary saint, philosopher of India, Adi Shankaracharya. These are the two men in the history has changed the psyche. Only difference is Shankaracharya wrote everything in Sanskrit, and unless we know little Sanskrit and then we take up the translation and try to read it. Swamiji put the essence of Vedanta and how it can be applied in daily life. So essentially, Swamiji's purpose of visiting Southeast Asia was to reach Chicago, the Parliament of Religion, which was held. Here was another visionary like Ramakrishna. Much before Swami Vivekananda could ever thought that he will be presenting his speeches in Parliament of Religion, or there could be something Parliament of Religion like. Here was a man, his guru, in his old age of 50, at that time 50 was a very pretty old age, he wrote with a charcoal that Naren, the future Swami Vivekananda, will teach the world when he will call upon inside and outside, maybe within India and outside India. Just to share with you, this is Ramakrishna's writings in Bengali, where he says, as I wrote, that Naren or Swami Vivekananda will teach the world. And he drew these two pictures, a peacock and a person's head. Peacock means Swami Vivekananda. Peacock is the symbol of purity. That's why Krishna puts the peacock feather on his head. And this face seems to be his own face, because you see a cancer at the throat, which Ramakrishna suffered at the end of his life. So he practically saw the future and said that, welcome sir. So it is he who said that this boy will teach. And at that time nobody cared for this 19-year-old boy who used to come to Sri Ramakrishna. Before going to America, Swami Vivekananda was traveling alone in India, and near Gujarat, near border of Rajasthan and Gujarat, he met his two brother disciples. One was Swami Turiyanandaji. Look at the state of mind of Swamiji. We are not going here for the history. We are seeing the mind of the person. He says, this brother disciple's name was Hari. He said, Hari bhai, I don't understand your religion. My heart is expanding and I do not know it will break one day. I feel for everyone. This realization of his feeling, his emotions, to say, to expand the idea and the mind of humanity, that how people can be kind to each other, how people can be helpful to each other. That feeling, fellow feeling for the world, came out in his address as Sisters and Brothers of America, and that was the impact that people went on clapping for 2 minutes. That's what you find in the book. So much before traveling, he said this to his brother disciples. There are many historical misconceptions about Swami Vivekananda's going to Parliament of Religion. We are not sure till who would have told him first that there is something, a program called Parliament of Religion is being organized in in America. But we know that this gentleman, Mr. Alasinga Perumal of Chennai, he was the foremost and most enthusiastic disciple of Swami Vivekananda. He collected money, and Swamiji says, no, you may collect, you may tell me to go until there is a call for divine. I am not going to travel. And he told his disciples to redistribute the collected money among the poor people in Madras. So first time when the collected money to send him was not used, it was distributed back to the poor people. Then he had a vision while being in Vivekananda Illam, which is in front of Marina Beach at Chennai. He had a vision that Sri Ramakrishna is walking on the ocean and calling him to come or calling him to go. When he saw this vision several times, he was a bit convinced that could be that my going is an order from the providence. But he was not sure. So he wrote a letter to Holy Mother Sri Sarada Devi and said that people are telling me to go. I had this kind of vision, and Holy Mother wrote to him giving her blessings that yes, this is the wish of the Lord that you should travel. He was 29 years old. Don't put it today in 2018 that a 29 years old goes to America. Now we all go. Now everybody can fly. That was not time. That was very different. It used to take 25 to 30 days to reach the other side of the globe. Second was Maharaja Ajit Singh of Khetri. Just before starting his journey from Bombay, Swami Vivekananda was in Chennai, but Maharaja's secretary came all the way to Chennai from Khetri, which is in Rajasthan, and told that you must come to Khetri before you travel. Swamiji said, I don't have time to come to Khetri. Remember, they had to travel many times by the bullock cart. There was no motor cars available. Swamiji goes there because Maharaja of Khetri had a son born a few months before. Swamiji goes there, and whatever money Alasinga Perumal had collected for the second time, Raja Ajit Singh gave a handsome purse again to Swamiji. And remember, the dress which we find is something like what the kings used to wear at that time. Though not the trousers, but the overcoat and the turban, etc. This was given by the secretary of Maharaja Ajit Singh in Bombay. Swamiji first denied, I can't wear this dress. So they said, no, if you go, nobody will appreciate the way you dress. It is better that you look at this day. You may look like a king, but that's what you are. And Swamiji agreed, and eventually he wore the dress and went. So he started from Bombay. Many people say he started from Gateway of India, but Gateway of India came into existence in 1924. So he started from the Bombay, whatever Apollo Bandar was the name at that time maybe. But now we have a statue of Swamiji in Gateway of India, from where originally he would have. So it was 31st of May 1893 that Swamiji sailed from India. Beautiful incidents, a lot of descriptions are there about it. He was very emotional, and before riding the ship, he said to the disciples who came that I am going to the land of enjoyment from the land of renunciation. Now when we travel, we don't understand because the whole world practically has become one. So he was very emotional, and he felt that the responsibility of him is there. And there was nobody or no institution who has told him to go. It is some disciples, some devotees, some friends told him that you must go, you are the fit person to go. You are the fittest. He had no credentials with him, and he just went. But how he went up to Chicago, the journey what we are going to go through. This was the SS Peninsular vessel by which Swamiji travelled on 31st May from Bombay. The ship first stops at Colombo, Sri Lanka. This is the old picture of that. And many disciples came there. He was not allowed to get down or disembark from the ship because of the diseases and all that. At Colombo, Swamiji went to this famous Buddhist temple, and when he was there for a day, he went round the city of Colombo and went to the famous temple of Buddha. Swamiji had a very natural inclination and love for Buddha. Even in future, after the development of religion, he said, when he was very well received and became overnight celebrity as today's vocabulary, he said, if Buddha had a message for the East, I have a message for the West. And Swamiji said, very truly, we can see the effect in the history and also in the present. Swamiji says, America and also Europe is sitting on a volcano. Accept spirituality, otherwise you will be doomed. Spirituality is to be a real human being at the heart. Until that is there, all our systems, whether it is political, social or whichever, will not be able to sustain because we are eventually human beings. And as just now we heard, that we are spirits. And nobody can live just on the level of physical body for a long time. We cherish and we all aspire to reach and to touch that side of us which is consciousness, which is truly God in terms of Swamiji. Next stop was Penang in Malaysia now, and Swamiji came down and we have a place there. Wherever we go, we visit the place where Swamiji could have put his feet there. And there is a beautiful terminology, a beautiful sutra in our scriptures that Tirthi Kurvanti Tirthani. How a place become a place of pilgrimage? Is because of the temple? Is because of the mosque or a church? No. The great people come to this place and make that place more holier. That's why we all want to go to the place of pilgrimage. So, Swamiji put his feet in the land of Malaysia at this point of time now. And it was not before 15 to 20 years that a small movement first started in Malaysia, much before in Singapore. Singapore port, as it was in 1900, Swamiji came and stayed for 3 days in Singapore. This is the famous letter of Swami Vivekananda. These are the originals. Actually, it was required by the Indian Heritage Center, so we requested our headquarter authority to provide us the originals copy, and they sent it. So here Swamiji writes about Singapore. Singapore is the capital of the state settlements. It is a fine botanic garden with the most splendid collection of palms. The beautiful fan-like palm called the traveller's palm grows here in abundance. And the breadfruit tree everywhere. The celebrated mangosteen is plentiful here as mangoes in Madras. But mango is not better. The people here are not half so dark as the people of Madras, although so near the line. Singapore possesses a fine museum too. Swamiji went to our botanical garden and also the museum. We did little research work and we found this is the entrance of botanical garden as it was in 1900. Now we have a different entrance. But surprisingly, the old entrance is still there, though it is closed. People don't move from there. But when you go to botanical garden and come towards north, if I'm not mistaken, you can see still the pillars of the old gate. You find some postcards in the archives where you find the botanical garden as it was in 1900. Swamiji came in 1893, so 1900 is quite closer, so we are taking 1900. Once we had visited botanical garden and Mr. Rao was the retired director, so we requested him to accompany us and we went round. And I told, is there any tree which is more than 120 years old? And we found some trees. And this is the famous Tembusu tree, still there, and probably the only living being who has lived in time of Swami Vivekananda. And surprisingly, the same tree you find on the $5 note in Singapore currency. This was the museum at that time and now. Though I hear that before that the museum was in a very small place, later on it was shifted here. From Singapore, Swamiji, the ship Peninsular Traveller went to Hong Kong. Swamiji got on, he has very fascinating description what he saw when the ship reached Hong Kong. And Swamiji says in this place that nobody can beat the people of Hong Kong. Of course, he went to Canton, inside China. That the activity, the rajas, which he found there, he said, I have not found anywhere. So Swamiji's observation was very apt at that time. Swamiji goes to Canton from Hong Kong and went to see this famous temple, temple of 500 Gyanis or Arhat, the disciples. A beautiful incident happens there. The guide on the ship told him that you cannot travel, you cannot enter mainland China now. At that time, the situation was much difficult. We are talking 125 years before. They will not allow, no foreigners goes there. You will be killed. Swamiji said, I have come all the way, let me go. When Swamiji got down and wanted to walk, the guy wanted to flee away from there, and he found many people, many men approaching, rushing, as if they want to fight or they want to hurt. Swamiji caught out of the guide and said, you cannot go before telling me the Chinese word for an Indian yogi. The gentleman told him, and Swamiji bowed down to the crowd and told, I am a yogi from India. And there was a miraculous change in the behavior. Those who were rushing towards him, maybe with some weapons or something in their hand, all put everything aside and bowed down to him and started asking something from Swamiji. Swamiji had called out of this guide. He said, what these people are telling? He said, they are talking about, which Swamiji heard, which is similar to a North Indian word called kavacha. Kavacha is an amulet. So they were asking for an amulet from Indian yogi. So Swamiji immediately took a piece of paper, wrote Om few times and made amulet and gave to those people. So This was the first encounter, and after Swamiji's visit, Swamiji visited China. I think after 110 years, the other Swami, about 7-8 years before went. Then the ship came to Japan. This is a picture of, so first ship comes to Nagasaki, and then Swamiji went to Yokohama by road. Actually here, he left the SS Peninsular vessel. This was the second vessel Swamiji took, called the Empress of India, and this took Swamiji to Vancouver in Canada. From there, Swamiji goes to British Columbia. From there, Swamiji goes to Chicago. When Swamiji travels from British Columbia in train, he found a lady. She is very social, very approaching. So she approached, looking at Swamiji's bright face and with different kind of dress. Who are you and where you are going, etc. And she was very much impressed by Swamiji's way of talking. And she was Kate Sangwan, and she eventually became host for Swamiji for many years to come in America. When Swamiji was in Chicago, many times we say, because we don't have probably the eyes to see how the divine works in our life, but great people do see that. Swamiji was exhausted. One day, he was dark complexion. Nobody bothers for a dark man at that time in America. No hotel wanted to open the doors, even if he wanted to pay. He was exhausted and sat down on a footpath. He doesn't know where he is. Later on, he found it was Dearborn Avenue, where he was sitting beside the house. The door opens. A lady comes out and says, "Are you for parliament of religion?" He said, "Yes." "You look like Indian." He said, "Yes." "Why don't you come in?" The lady, without knowing the person, a young boy, young man of 28, 29, invited him inside. And that became the headquarters of Swamiji for next 4 years. So Mr. and Mrs. Hay, George W. Hay and Mary Hay, and the 4 sisters, 2 daughters of Mr. and Mrs. Hay and 2 cousin sisters, they became the dearest sisters of Swamiji. There are so many incidents, we don't have time here to talk about that. So he used to call Father Pope and Mother Church. The name he used to give nicknames to all. This is the Art Institute of Chicago, which you find on the invitation letter of this program. 1893, Swamiji overnight, and this is the picture exactly which was hanging in the streets of Chicago. Actually, about 4 years before, the same institution or organization which would have organized this parliamentary religion came to Singapore and had a small meeting with all the religious leaders. And our president at that time, Swami Muktirbanji, also attended that. So the secretary of that organization told, "Oh, there was a parliament of religion once upon a time in 1893, and one man came from India and made a big impact." Swami Muktirbanji told that I am the humble member of that organization which he started. Eventually, they organized similar parliament of religion in Australia. These are the 2 pictures available about the congregation on the stage. There were packed 4,000 people in the Art Institute. Though this could be photos of one of the sessions of Parliament of Religion, because somehow, even if you enlarge, we do not see Swamiji in this group. Some people say, this is Swamiji, but it doesn't seem to be like when you enlarge it. But this is the real picture of Parliament of Religion which Swamiji participated. He is representative of Buddhism from Sri Lanka. I'm forgetting if you come. So this is the group of picture. Mr. Dharmapada was representing Buddhism from Sri Lanka. So these are the five, though many others were there from Asia, but this is the picture we find. Mr. Vivekananda Gandhi represented Jainism, and Swamiji of course from Hinduism. And we don't know about Mr. Lakshminarayan and Mr. Narasimhacharya. We don't know much detail about them. Swamiji represented in the Parliament of Religion, for which we are celebrating here after 125 years. He represented the spirit of India. Recently I was in Bangladesh and they were celebrating the same event. And of course the majority population is Muslims there. And for some reason, of course they don't have that great reverence for India as a country or Indian as a thought. But we must remember, when we say Swamiji represented India, it's not the political India what you see today. At that time, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Nepal, all were part of greater India. So Swamiji represented that greater, where the culture is the same. Political boundaries have changed, culture is the same. So Swamiji was pride of Asia for us. Swamiji was son of India, and eventually he was son of the world. Many times he has written from America when the brother disciples told him that it is already 3 years, please come back. Swamiji said, where do you want me to come back? What is there with you that I should come back? That was Swamiji's way to encourage the brother disciple. I said, no, prepare the ground first before I come and before we do something. There are some Swamiji's quotes which were collected here, which are really powerful and which says, may I born again and again, he exclaimed, and suffer 1,000 miseries, if only I may worship the only God in whom I believe, the sum total of all souls, and above all my God, the wicked, my God, the afflicted, my God, the poor of all races. He never represented a small group of people, whether you call them Hindus or Indians or whatever. We don't go into details. Swamiji's principle, few ideas. The philosophy of idol worship, which is a very big confusion in the minds of foreigners or other religions, that why Hindus worship so many. We go in Singapore, many places. Youths mainly they ask this question: why so many gods? Why so many statues? It is not so many. There are so many statues, forms. There are not so many gods. Hindus believe in one God manifested in different way. The philosophy of service. It is not social service. Spiritual service is service. When service becomes your spiritual practice, then it becomes a philosophy. And the religion. The religion is not the bundle of rituals. You must go cross the theological boundaries, and the philosophy has to accept that we are eventually divine. Renunciation and service is the twin ideal for everybody. Renunciation doesn't mean always that you have to leave your hut and home and become a monk or a nun. Renunciation is something, if I have to come to this stage, there are 5 steps. I must renounce one by one to come here. Renunciation is your effort to go higher. The more you go higher, of course, the lower levels will be left behind. That is renunciation. And service is only the way of life. Those who serve only live, with Swamiji's famous words are there, that actually they alone live, who live for others. For oneself, even the creatures, even the animals, even the birds and insects also live for themselves. You say, no, we love our children. Every living being loves their children. Human being has a privilege to love others' children. Human being has a privilege to identify himself or herself with everybody, which animals cannot. Religion is realization, not talk, not doctrine, not theories, however beautiful they may be. It is being and becoming, not hearing and acknowledging. These This is changing the total way of our looking at the religion, etc. The life is short and the vanities of the world are transient, but they alone live who live for others. The rest are more dead than alive. He might call him Mahatma, who is a great person, whose heart bleeds for the poor. Otherwise, he is a Duratma. Duratma is one who is not at all, not even a gentleman. Never quarrel about religion. All quarrels and disputation concerning religion simply show that spirituality is not present. So more and more we believe in the philosophy, the religion, which could be a point of conflict, becomes a point of harmony. Strength is life and weakness is death, because he said this in my gospel. So long as the millions live in hunger and ignorance, I hold every man a traitor who, having been educated at their expense, pays not the least heed to them. It's our duty, whoever is in a better position in whichever way, to see that common masses are benefited by our wealth, our ideas, our intellectual. And this is the famous statement of Swamiji, arise awake and stop not till the goal is reached. This is practically the essence what he says. It may be that I shall find it good to get outside my body, to cast it off like a worn-out garment, but I shall not cease to work. I shall inspire men everywhere until the world shall know that it is one with God. We all pray today that it's not only the celebrating an event, but may the inspiring, motivating and divine words of Swamiji inspire us, and we don't stop till we reach our goal. Thank you.
Thank you for your eye-opening sharing on some of the lesser-known aspects of Swamiji's life and how close to home he really was. Now, it's my honor to call upon the last speaker of today, His Excellency Shri Jawed Ashraf, to deliver his insight into the views on the Indian ethos and the relevance in today's society. May I also invite the remaining esteemed speakers back on stage so that they may enjoy the last speech with the full view of the audience. The esteemed speakers, please.
Before we begin, we'd like to introduce His Excellency Shri Jawed Ashraf again.
Just for those who might have forgotten, he is the High Commissioner of the Republic of India to the Republic of Singapore. Mr. Jawed Ashraf, please.
I'd request Mr. Vajramanaji to please felicitate His Excellency. Thank you, Vajramanaji. Javed ji, please.
Namaskar. Good morning to everyone. First of all, my apologies for coming in late, as I was at another event and I had to leave it midway to be present here. Speaking after Swamiji, whom I had the honor of hearing, and after, I'm sure, what must have been an enlightening lecture by Arvindji, it is a really daunting task to speak on a subject which is truly very deep and very large, and it is, I think, beyond my capacity to really do full justice to a theme that perhaps has occupied Indians for generations, if not millennia. But let me first begin by congratulating Vivekanada Seva Sangh and also Ramakrishna Mission for organizing this event to mark the 125th year of Swami Vivekananda's now very well known lectures and speeches and addresses to the Parliament of Religion in Chicago in 1893. It is an event that is now being celebrated in India, in many parts of the world. Vice President Shri Venkaiah had also gone to Chicago to participate in that event. But it is also important because it is perhaps appropriate to remind ourselves of the simple and a profound message that came through in those addresses to the World Parliament, the Parliament of Religions in Chicago. But we should not be remembering Swami Vivekananda or reading about his life, his work, his mission, his message, only because of that extraordinary speeches that he gave in that event in Chicago, though often the world sees him only through that prism. In his extraordinary life that was just there for 39 years, and every time you read a little bit about him, you wonder how could a human being encompass so much in so short a span of life. It was like a lamp that burned so intensely that somehow it had to also extinguish itself very soon. But its light is eternal. It continues to be a guide, it continues to be a source of direction and inspiration for generations that have followed him. And one evidence of this is that we have such a large turnout here in Singapore on a Saturday morning. People who are keenly interested and following that message. As Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji said in Malaysia, in Kuala Lumpur in November 2015, and I was there, that Swami Vivekananda is not a name of a person. It is not a name of an institution, but that it is the identity of the ancient Indian soul. And this is a very profound statement, because if you think of the Indian ethos from Ved to Vivekananda, it is what Swami Vivekananda said, has no beginning, it has no end, because it isn't just a simple one scripture, one script, one set of words that came down, but that it was an accumulated wisdom of so many saints, each adding on to the wisdom of the previous one, but running in a constant stream of thought. And something that in some way has been encompassed now in the philosophy of Vedanta. And the fundamental issue of Vedanta was what he has always spoken about, the idea of oneness. Oneness that is deeper than its physical manifestation. It is something that has permeated through all our scriptures, through all our philosophy, through all our literature. If you see that in Bhagavad Gita also. But what stands out about him is that he was a person of so many different manifestations and so many different facets. That he was profoundly grounded in Western philosophy, literature, in thought. That he had perhaps read more than most of us with all our modern education have read. That he was a person who had gone deep into reading but had also realized that there was a limitation to knowledge in this form. That it had to transcend it into something that he must experience himself. The power of intuition, the power of insight that is something that comes through a process of experience and deep meditation, deep thinking. Meditation somehow always puts us off because it somehow means that we have to set a certain time aside and reflect in a particular posture. But it is that even when you're walking around in the streets, when you're talking to people, you can be a meditative self. That you are able to see beyond the obvious, beyond the physical manifestations, beyond the specific events that you are a part of at that particular point of time. He was also able to not just do what often people in spiritual pursuits do is just to retreat into a world devoted entirely to a pursuit of spiritual quest and understanding. But that he actually traveled through the length and breadth of the country, interacting with the extraordinarily diverse Indian population, the richest of kings, the poorest of people, people of all faiths, of all walks of life, all persuasions. And to do that without any sense of judgment, without any sense of qualification, without any prior stereotypes or prejudices. And that is where that treasure and wealth of experience and knowledge and insight that comes from. Because what you see in those speeches and in what his writings contains an entire universe. There is no contradiction, because those contradictions arise when you piece together knowledge that is acquired from these disparate sources. You learn something from this book and you learn something from another textbook, and then you try to provide a chain that links it together. And as Swamiji was just talking about when he explained the notion of idolatry and spiritualism and God to a Western audience, I think it was something they could relate to. Because all human beings eventually want to reduce a particular pursuit to something they can relate to, which is always a physical manifestation in some form or the other. There will always be a visual representation, there will always be a physical dimension to it, and that is how it has always been, and that those who are able to, and that is this whole pursuit of spiritualism, to be able to go beyond that. And which is what this whole prayer was, his message, that you start with that external prayer, the physical prayer, the material prayer, then you struggle to go to a higher level, which he spoke about, Swamiji spoke about renunciation. It is not about giving up, but it is about release, and these are two very different words. It is not about detachment but non-attachment, which are again very two different concepts. And it is about then rising to a level where you get into spiritual prayer and then you seek that union with that God. A word which is hard to define for anyone, it's so abstract. But as he said, that everyone, whatever path they choose, ultimately seek that same realization and that same union. And you speak about any faith in the world, you speak about any religion in the world, if there is that one pursuit which is how do I get close to God, how do I get to my Creator, to my Supreme Being, to whichever words you use to describe that. So for him, why it stands out is because he was able to embrace this world, embrace this life, yet rise above it and pursue it. And which is why at a time, think about India and Asia at that point of time. 1863 is when he's born. This is 6 years after the first war of independence. We are already an emaciated society, a nation in some sense, in a state of decline. We have just passed over from East India Company into a form of colonial rule. There was a sense of despondency, but there was also a growing sense of ossification of societies. We were too caught up in rituals, in forms, in shapes, in sometimes blind faith, in some sort of fatalism, about a complete helplessness before some manifest destiny that is going to take hold of us. Economically, we had become weak. This vitality and the strength of the country, of the people in society had been sapped. It was also an Asia in eclipse, an Asia that had been the birth of so many faiths, so many cultures, so many religions, of such high and profound intellectual, physical achievements, material achievements. There was also in a state of decline. There was a rise of colonial powers, and it was in this context that he actually rejected so much of that fatalism and pessimism and the nihilism that existed at that point of time. And in a sense, it isn't just that he provided a spiritual awakening of India. That was important. But that spiritual awakening for India was an awakening of a much larger idea of liberation, of not just political freedom, because that is easy to acquire, but a freedom from all the trappings and chains that we had bound ourselves into and from society and nations involved themselves into. And it is therefore something that it goes beyond just. So we have had a political definition of liberation and freedom struggle. We have an economic definition and path. But for him, it was something in which if you got to the key of the being, then all these other problems, all these other solutions would find a way out. And this is where you see the genius of that. And in his own lifetime, he predicted, he saw that there will be an awakening of India, that he could see the stirrings of hope. And this is more than 100 years ago, more than 6 decades before we actually attained independence. Because he could see the strength of our country, the unity in diversity, the spirit that had permeated through centuries. And today, when you think of the lessons and the messages, and this is what I was going to speak about, then you realize that it is perhaps even more relevant today than it was even then. First of all, it is who you are as an individual, the process of learning itself. Nowadays, of course, everyone's neck is bent towards the screen of a cell phone. How many of us observe people around us? How many of us see when we are driving or when we are walking, do we observe the life around us? How many of us even talk to people and understand? How many of us actually sit in contemplation of life, of experiences? Because if you have to be an individual, you have to choose your own path. You have to. There may be a common bin in which we all belong, but within that, each one has to be different. And see what he did. He rebelled before he came to it. He actually questioned everything. He was, in some sense, irreverent. Some people might have thought he's a guy who's going to actually is by our standards of hierarchy and our standards of respect for the elders, the way we define it, might have called him someone who was actually impudent, badly behaved, because he was frank in his questioning. But then the Guru we finally found was also very patient and also understood Ramakrishna that there is no other path to truth and understanding without the question. Because, so he was always against blind faith, blind acceptance, against rituals. But look at the other side. He did not simply say, I found God. He said he could see its manifestation. He saw questions in issues of poverty, in issues of caste, in issues of social divisions, in issues of irrationality. And these were, for him, as much real issues as those spiritual pursuits. And this is why he continues to be so relevant today, why he becomes even more relevant. Because in trying to bridge real life and the world with that quest, that is where he stands apart from many rishis and saints who have been. So if you think of yourself as an individual, as a person who needs evolution, who needs development, it was a combination of knowledge, spiritual pursuit, and life's experiences. And in life's experiences is not the life's experiences of senses. It is the experience of people around. And I would say that today, as we think of education, as we think of youth, it is critically important that we inculcate that spirit in education. that spirit of inquiry, that questioning, that irreverence, but also to inculcate patience that the first step of question is not the answer, doesn't come then. Each why must lead to another why, and to another why, to another why. As Swamiji said, you keep climbing steps till you understand what those are. And this is a very difficult process. And sometimes it leads you into confusion. But confusion shouldn't deter you. It should actually then lead to the path of clarity, because clarity evolves from a phase of confusion. So we have to first bring up individuals the way he did. And remember, he achieved all this in a span of life when we're just about beginning to even get our feet in this world. I mean, by 40, all of us still behave like we haven't even discovered where we are going. And he had already completed several lifetimes in that 4 decades, less than 4 decades of existence. The next thing is about, and which is so important, is about service. And we cannot emphasize enough how important, I mean, for him, the idea that service to God is really about service to human beings. Because if you are seeking that person who lives with every person, that oneness, the immutability of soul, the fact that it is all around everyone, and it is in everyone, centered in everyone, but without any defined circle around it. This brings everyone into the same, and therefore, if you are talking about life in existence, service, and today, service to humanity, service to society, is something that it doesn't come easily in our daily pursuit of life, because it seems like such a struggle. But to draw a subject from economics, when you do something, economic theory says there is diminishing returns. So if you consume something over and over again, the joy from it is diminished. So that's the fundamental theory of economics. The only place where it doesn't diminish is in giving. If you pursue a path of giving, in whatever little way, it can never be measured in the metrics of numbers, because it is only something you know what you value. It is sometimes the 5 minutes, it's sometimes the attention, it is sometimes just a few words. It isn't just about giving wealth, because that sometimes, by the way, is the easiest thing to do, because it is so easy to part with. But it is time, it is yourself, it is compassion, it is attention, it is sensitivity to the others. It is even standing up for someone who's facing injustice. It's the most difficult thing. So service is something which doesn't have to be through necessarily an NGO or through a big organization or through a great amount of distribution of wealth. If each of us thought that every day we should be doing something in service of someone else, the world will certainly be a better place without us having to reach a certain position to have that power to give. And this is what the power of giving is really about. The third thing that I think that we should draw from him, and I think Swamiji just put that slide up, is this struggle against inequity. In a purely normal abstract term, the world is becoming more iniquitous. I mean, I could give as a subject for another story how the techno-economic revolution is a natural way of advancing this iniquity. In some say it in context of globalization, some say it in context of the different ways, but societies are becoming. In economics, we call it the Gini coefficient, and if you look at the trends in Gini coefficient over the last 20 years, you will see that. Even if it wasn't so, there is always a iniquitous society. And and when I look at the Ramakrishna Mission today and around the world, this idea of service is what defines them. They are not simply a spiritual retreat. Here in Singapore, they are changing lives. I have been there, I have seen how much they are doing in terms of counseling, in terms of, because the bud of the youth can either die at that stage, wither away, or it can flower into something majestic. And that is, again, itself. But also they work constantly towards against this iniquitous society. to promote equity, not just of economic terms, but of opportunities, of dignity. The most priceless thing in this world, that concept of dignity, that when we can actually make every human being feel equal in a sense of dignity. To fight today, and I would say that it is true also of India today, his lesson is even more important today in India than it was. Like Gandhiji, before Swami Vivekananda, we pay a lot of lip service, but we need to also imbibe that lesson, the lessons of fighting against this travesty of divisions of castes, of classes, of different hierarchies of professions, of the differences in faiths, differences in languages and regions. Because ultimately it goes back to that same message, which is really part of the Indian ethos, the pluralistic ethos of oneness. So how can, if you believe in that oneness, how can you also then believe in these inequities? People will have different income levels, but people don't necessarily have to have different levels of opportunities or different levels of dignity. And this is not about a Marxian ideology of saying everyone must have, or a misplaced Marxian ideology of everyone having similar income levels or same income level. It's about who you are in relation to each other. Do I respect you as a manifestation of the divine in you? That is the fundamental principle of the inequity that we have to fight, beyond the economic, at this level of the scale. The fourth point is about what we are experiencing in the world today. It's the divisions, the tensions of the resurgence of identities of us versus them, the superiority of one over the other. We are better, they are better. It is my faith versus your faith. It is my identity versus yours. It is exclusion against inclusion. It is the sense that of conflicts that we have again experiencing in the name of identities of languages, of religions, of cultures, and in India of social stratification of caste as well. So if you look at today in the world, it is this message that we have to again spread. We need those parliaments of religion once again. We need speakers like Swami Vivekananda once again, who said that Indian tradition says that we will not say that mine versus yours, that I do not have to live according to yours and you don't have to live, that we will respect all religions of the world equally, that we will respect all faiths and all traditions in the same way. That is the message we need to again revive. You don't have to do what I have to do, and I don't have to do what you have to do, but we can live in respect and harmony with each other because we are all in pursuit of that same path towards the same goal and towards the same destination. But we are living in a world which is actually moving in that opposite direction, and therefore we need to, again, as people of that tradition, of that faith, remind ourselves that what we spoke about then is that the fundamental principle of Vedanta, that is, truth is one, the wise see it in different ways. That is what really, in a sense, defines us. And we have to see that spirit rise. And therefore, it will lead to healthy, mutually respectful discourse, to understanding and appreciation of each other. And again, I commend Ramakrishna Mission for being such a staunch and ardent advocate of that spirit of multiculturalism and of. And it is, if we do that, remember who was the first person who spoke about Asia as one. Today we all talk about Asian integration, Asian century. We speak about the economic integration, the connectivity in Asia, about East Asia Summit, which will be held not far from here in November, of countries coming together. Where Swami Vivekananda, when he traveled through these parts and interacted with people, he came up with the idea that there is a spiritual unity across Asia. which sometimes stands in contrast with, at that point of time, the materialism of the West. And today, we are talking about the political, diplomatic and economic initiatives to unite Asia again, as to create what we call the Asian century. Prime Minister Shri Arvindan Neelkandan also said that Asia of rivalries will hold us all back, Asia of unity will help shape this century. So, but from Swami Vivekananda's point of view, it was about the spiritual unity. And I think, in some ways, if you see what unites us, you go across Asia and you see Buddhism being practiced everywhere. Ashoka had sent messengers of peace in order to in all parts, in all directions. You go everywhere and you see that recognition also that, here is India, which is a spiritual home for the people. You go to Mongolia, you go to even parts of Japan, you go to... So it is this unity which he spoke about, and today the world is speaking about it again. And so, but in addition to the economic unity, the economic initiative, the political initiative, the diplomatic initiative, what Prime Minister has also done, he says, let us revive, and he spoke about it in the Mongolian Parliament in April of 2015, May of 2015. He spoke about the spiritual unity of Asia and how we need to bring ourselves together. And we started so many conferences to unite people on the spiritual plane. It will also be important if we have to fight violence. The violence that takes many forms. It takes place at home, it takes place in communities, it takes place in societies, it takes place between societies, between nations, it takes the form of extremism and terrorism and class violence and communal violence, religious violence. If we have to fight that, then we have to revive that spirit once again. It is not going to be easy, but we need to keep repeating ourselves to ourselves, reminding ourselves that the great message that he embodied, which was part of that tradition. And finally, very important point is about climate change and global warming. Now, why do I say that Swamiji's message is relevant for global warming and for climate change? It's because of oneness again. If there is oneness, and Swamiji spoke about the only living being in Singapore who's still there, and witnessed Swamiji, Swami Vivekananda, was the tree. So we are inheritors of a tradition that treats earth as mother, which sees divinity in trees and in plants. And you in India, you have sacred groves. They are the only primal forests left in the country in this savage process of development and urbanization. Because these sacred groves are groves forests where divine beings live. So no one has ever touched them. There is one south of Delhi also in Mangarbani in the Gurgaon Faridabad road, which I used to go to, and that's the only place where you will see the primal Indian forest, because it's supposed to house divinity. The other part of it is that if you are looking at yourself within and seeking that oneness within and satisfaction, your material acquisition itself comes down in a fair degree. Because your contentment is from within, not from transient acquisitions of senses outside. And to really solve the problem of climate change and global warming, it isn't just technologies, it also has to be reduction in consumption. Because the cleanest energy is the energy not consumed. And so in different ways, we are again, which is why when Prime Minister was talking about climate change in Paris and elsewhere, and he's just been awarded with his UN recognition for his contribution to climate change, he embedded this not just in our obligation to the future, but also in our heritage. That it is something that is being intrinsic to us as human beings and as people and as Indians, to believe that we are not above nature but part of nature. Because if we were above nature, then we can exploit nature for our good. But if we think of ourselves as part of nature, then we cannot destroy nature without destroying ourselves in the process. And it isn't something we take exclusive credit for, and again it brings me back to something that I do not want to sound, as Swami Vivekananda would have been very opposed to, as some sort of an Indian chauvinist. What we did, and what Prime Minister Shri Modi did at that point of time, was to say, he told then President of France that let us ask all countries to contribute some text from their heritage about protection of nature, and let us bring out a book. That is then the combination, the recognition of oneness, that we are inheritors in different geographies of different traditions, but we eventually unite as one in our soul. So in all these respects, I think it is important to learn and read and understand what, and even more practice, reflect, contemplate on what Swamiji did. And to take some time out from our daily lives to be of help to someone every day and ask ourselves that question. That were we today at some point help someone feel better, more hopeful, more optimistic and happier and more centered. These are the simple lessons that we can take into our lives without being deterred by the fact that here was an intellectual giant of the ages, the likes of which the world will rarely see. But to do our own little bit to be part of that. So once again, I think that to organize this event served more than just to remind ourselves of that extraordinary speeches that he delivered in Chicago, but to go back to his teachings, to go back to his life, and to realize that in some ways it was not very different from the start of our lives. He grew up in a privileged family, he went to college, he acquired learnings, he was just too gifted, that's a separate story. He could learn something with just one reading, but that's a different story. But the fact is that he was able to transcend all that. We don't have to all of us do that, but we can still transcend ourselves in our daily lives to do something better than we have been doing. And with that message, thank you very much for including me. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for sharing that deeply poignant and pertinent sharing on Swamiji's views. Now, after these three highly intellectual and enlightening speeches, I'm sure a lot of us have some burning questions to ask or queries to clear. We thank you for your patience in holding them until this, and would now like to move into our exclusive Q&A session with our esteemed guests.
Please note, to facilitate this Q&A session, we will have our volunteers go around this area with mics so that you can ask questions to any of these speakers. But before you ask a question, please tell your name and please try to emphasize which speaker you're asking a question to so that we may facilitate this Q&A better. So, if there's anyone who wishes to ask a question, please raise your hand or bring attention to yourself, and we'll have our volunteers come to you with mics. Are there any questions right now?
Yeah. Hi, good morning. I'm Neeraj. Basically, if I start my question right, यूनान मिस्र और रोमा मिट गए जहाँ से कुछ बात है कि हस्ती मिटती नहीं हमारी. So whenever I hear this message, I always keep thinking, what is the reason that Iqbal wrote this? And I can say, after hearing today's speech, that yes, our foundation is so strong that nobody can destroy us. And thank you, Vivekananda Seva Sangh, for organizing such an event. My question to His Excellency, basically today's world where everybody is so digital, right, and especially our kids, who are so fond of iPad and all the digital words, how do you think they should spend their time at least on a daily basis so that they can build as a good individual? What message you would love to give? Because I have my kids especially for this purpose in this program. Can you please advise them? Thank you.
I didn't think I was going to be a counselor for students today and for children. No, again, I mean, I would not want to offer any specific advice because again, as I said in the beginning, it also has to be a process of discovery, and every child may require a very different approach, and depending on personalities and depending on aptitudes also. But I think the responsibility is fundamentally yours and that of the school. The responsibility that you have the desire, the will, the interest, and the time that the child may need for you to deal with these issues. Because, I mean, my limited experience in watching children, and particularly the millennial, is that it's very easy for parents also to hand over the remote of a television set, or even now of an iPad, and that keeps the child entertained for the day while they pursue their own lives. And it then becomes a kind of a very convenient and comfortable setting. But if you are able to spend time reading, talking, questioning, as an equal also sometimes, I mean, you're not talked down, because sometimes the child's mind is far more fertile than ours, because ours get trained into various ways of thinking, and then create that consciousness. And I know parents do that, and a lot of them do it, that they take them out to look at birds, to walk in the nature, to learn to appreciate the gifts of the divine, to ensure that they don't develop tendencies of acquisition. I know someone who said that every time a child buys a new cloth, he makes sure that he gives up the one that he liked the most before that. This is just some ways of expressing, but you know the principles, but you know what you want to imbibe. So in many ways, it's really your responsibility, and that the school, of course, comes next, but it really boils down to how much of yourself you're also willing to give. Yourself, not in terms of writing checks, not in terms of providing material benefits, but also in terms of your time, your attention, your ability to nurture that inquisitive mind in different ways, sensitivity, compassion, respect, a sense of inclusiveness. Those are things that can happen on a daily basis, and you will see the difference for yourself. Swamiji, you want to say something?
A child was asked in school a very common question which many times people ask the children, what do you want to be? And the child says, I want to be a mobile phone. Because my parents seems to be loving mobile phone more than myself. So as His Excellency just now told, it's a matter of asking simple questions to ourselves. Every time when we say tradition, people immediately think, oh, he is old-fashioned, old-time person. Tell to yourself, don't tell to me. It is how long that you have not seen the sunrise. It is how long that you have not seen the sunset. It is how long that you didn't look at the sky with the stars. Because these are the time which we are either sleeping or we are occupied with other business. Just now we heard about the climate. We need to be with the climate. It's not only the trees, but it's the climate itself. So until we love and identify with that, we won't be able to contribute anything to that. Secondly, so far as this electronic gazettes are concerned, rightly said by a poet in India that try to see small books in the hands of you and your children than the mobile phone. Thank you.
Hello, good day to all. Thanks. My question is for Swamiji. Thank you for Swamiji for sharing a lot of evidence and pictorial proofs that Swamiji traveled throughout Asia. But I have one question actually about the social media which is running quite long already. There are some recordings of the Vivekananda's Chicago speech. So I just want to know whether are these real or is it just marked one? Because I do think that time there was no recording, so much of extensive recording was existing. So just want to know if you have done so much of research, whether I can clarify whether these things are the true facts or the false.
Thank you. Actually, there is no recording available at present. Though we find in the books that Swamiji's voice was recorded, at least in my knowledge, 2 times. One was by the Maharaja of Mysore, and once it was by Miss MacLeod in America. So, but at that time the recording system was very primitive, it has just come into existence. So unfortunately till today, we do not have the voice of Swami Vivekananda in reality. Now, in media, in YouTube, if you find there are many clippings where you can hear people say, oh, his voice was so good. Voice is so good, but it is not his. Other thing, somebody told after getting disgusted with this, whether it is real or not, said that yes, we could have been more fortunate to hear his voice, but it is more important to have understood his words. So it is read and it was published. This clipping was about 25 years before. It was published by a company. The recording you will find that somebody says in American accent, sisters and brothers, and people clap, and something like that is there. But these are all dramatization and voice. Somebody has put the voice, which is very good, professional voice. But till now, from this point of view, Swamiji's voice has yet to be rediscovered. We have not yet. Thank you.
Namaste. I'm Abhijit Thakur. This is a question for Swamiji. We observe that the whole speech of Swami Vivekananda was great, but the most celebrated part of that speech is his opening address, where he addresses the Americans as American brothers and sisters. And unlike the customary way of most others addressing the audience as brothers and sisters, he came with the vision of equanimity towards everybody. So how do we as a society develop this equanimity, vision of equanimity amongst ourselves?
If I understood the question, Swamiji's address as Sisters and Brothers of America, there is a book which all the proceedings of the Parliament of Religion is available. And it was not only Swamiji who addressed people as sisters and brothers or brothers and sisters, because general trend is to address as ladies and gentlemen. But there were others who has addressed the audience as brothers and sisters or sisters and brothers. As I told in my speech that probably it was the realization, it was the feeling. When you tell something truly which you have realized, to just call people as brothers and sisters doesn't mean that you really mean so. But Swamiji really meant the whole humanity, if he was a realized soul, the whole humanity is practically his brothers and sisters. So probably, we do not know, I am not the fittest person to say that, but the impact of the words lies in the realization of the person. Today, after 100 years, we are reading the words of Sri Ramakrishna. Look at what people had to say when they met him. Even the very compiler or the writer of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, Mahendranath Gupta, M., he says that he was stammering. He had no sense of dress. He himself says, I'm going to see so-and-so, but my shirt is unbuttoned. Will it look bad? So M says, everything is okay for you, sir. Because it was not his external personality which mattered. How many people remember? That's what I told in the beginning. Many thousands of lectures have been given on the same subject of religion, of philosophy, of theology. But why this is the lecture? Hundreds of lectures were given during Parliament of Religion. Tell me which lecture is being celebrated after 125 years. It is not that we are beating our drum and we love Swamiji, so let us celebrate everything on it. No, we don't do that. We are the actually last people to do that. But this message, these lectures have something special in that which is so relevant. Just now we heard. His every aspect is so relative, so related to us. So, I think he's addressing brothers and sisters, giving importance to ladies is a Western way also, where they address as ladies and gentlemen. And always we say ladies first, I say. It was not from that point of view as my understanding. It was not to put ladies first and let me tell sisters and brothers. I think provided his deep respect for the women, a reporter comes and says to him, Swamiji, what is the solution for today's women in India? Swamiji says, am I look like a woman? Why do you ask me? Let them solve their problems by themselves. It is women who will solve their problems. Men no need to interfere in solving their problem. You can be helping, you can be an aid, you can be a helper to them. But believe me, they are more intelligent than you. Thanks.
Myself, Durgesh today. My question to Swamiji, what is truth? Because we mostly fight for our perspective, like glass is half empty, half full. So which version is truth? So like it's a half empty, if you see from the deprived people's perspective, it's a half empty. And other side, it is half full. Like number, if you see that number 6 and number 9, if someone is standing over other side, it will look like 6, and someone is standing other side, it will look like 6. So what is truth?
If you want to know the final truth, there is no glass, there is no water. That's the truth. So you want to be optimistic that what we should be, and to find a solution in the present situation and not to condemn the situation and tell that it is insoluble. So I believe that to be optimistic and to be hopeful and to be intelligently finding the solution of the whatever kind of problem we have, I think that should be. Thanks.
In fact, the point you have raised is the source of all discord. That is, we define truth in our own ways, in a very partial understanding of everything. And what we understand, what we know, we take to be the absolute. Now you take the example of glass, which is actually a good example to start with, and you say it's half full or is it half empty, right? I mean, if you think of it, what are you doing? You're defining the same thing in two different ways. But the volume of water remains the same, even, and that physical structure of glass remains the same. But if you know that it's only a matter of differing perception, and if you learn that we are also part of a larger scheme of things, that you could have a point of view and I could have a point of view, but we don't destroy that glass or whatever water it has only because we have a different point of view, and we accept that you see it this way and I see it this way, and that particular volume of water will still remain the same. Then you begin to understand that there is a path beyond our narrow, restricted perspectives, which we take to be absolute perspectives and absolute truth. And when we do that in our daily lives, our discord with our family, within families, within societies, within even our groups will cease. We may actually sometimes come up with a solution and find a new definition for that which is accepted by everyone. But when will that come? That will come when we actually have deep respect for each other, when we recognize that we are, in some senses, in every respect equals, we're just looking at things a little differently. I think sometimes if we start changing in very subtle, simple ways, the way we act, think and behave, then it is going to start making larger differences to our lives and to the lives around us. I think that was a good example. When you extrapolate that problem to much larger societal problems, then you will see what we are talking about.
My name is Ramkrishna Mission. My question is to Mr. Arvind. Very thought-provoking talk which you gave in the first half. And I mean, mostly religion is nothing different with science. And then the Darwin theory, it is not a straight ladder, it is a branch, which is branched out. Now, I mean, I think this is the next topic for your next book. But my question is from your last book, For Breaking India, along with Rajiv Malhotra, which you wrote. A lot of the things which you see now in the Indian television, I think it is already brought in your book. There are a lot of nexus which is operating, okay, and at various different levels. And Sri Lanka was also part of it, and then there was a lot of things which happened there. Now you think that at this point in time, have we tried to try to some kind of, we have avoided that situation, or we are still in that path which you have mentioned that things can go wrong in a lot of various different ways?
Actually, this particular question is not exactly related to that topic here. Sorry. But nevertheless, I will try to answer this question relating into this particular session. In a way, it is also related to the previous question. We talked about what is the truth and should I equal to the truth. Ultimately, all the divisions are caused by this tendencies of, let us say, my truth alone is the only truth and you have to assert it. And this leads to a lot of problems of control and other things, and this leads to division. In Jainism, you have this concept called Saptabhangi. That means for everything, if you draw a truth table, then you have on and off, 1 and 0. But in Saptabhangi, they don't have 1 and 0. They tell that there are 7 levels of reality. For every truth, there are 7 levels of truths. So for every statement, you have to look at it from 7 different perspectives. And still, it will be undefined. Interestingly, in Judaism, in mystic traditions, they have this concept that every verse from the Jewish scripture, it has 70 meanings. Only when you understand the 70 meanings of a particular verse, you have understood that verse. Then only you can move to the next verse. Just think about it. So the point is, once we understand that pluralism is the basis of life, diversity, whether it is biodiversity or theodiversity, that is the basis of life, without which, if you create a monoculture, then the entire system will collapse. Now you see, you have got a biological system, okay, and the biological system is stable, or ecosystem is stable for external disturbances only when it is diverse within, when there is genetic diversity. In the same way, for a human society to live, there should be a mimetic diversity. Different types of mimetic systems should be allowed to exist, and not a single mimetic system should become the monocultural expansionist force. So, if we take this perspective and apply it to the scenarios that we have around us, and that is also our civilizational wisdom. That is what Swamiji also talked about. Never fight, cooperate. When we do that, when we understand everyone as an expression of the same Atman that is within us and the same Atman that we worship in our highest sacred places, even we are beginning. then these divisions will go. We need to evolve strategies for that. We need to inculcate these values into our education system. You have a famous physicist, Gotari. That is, even the Gotari Commission was there. He was the first person to introduce this in a social setup. He was the only Indian scientist who was asked to contribute to Niels Bohr's centenary volume. And as we all know, Niels Bohr was the person who discovered the complementary nature of the electron. He emphasized on that at the very basic fundamental level of reality, the reality can be in its extremely opposite states. It can be a wave as well as it can be a particle. Now, if at the very basic fundamental nature of reality can be in its extremely opposite things, what about everything else you have built over it? So he said, for an ordinary truth, the opposite is falsehood. This is what Niels Bohr said. For an ordinary truth, the opposite is false. True, false. But if the truth is magnificent, then the opposite of that is another magnificent truth. So you have to see it in terms of complementarity and not as competing things. Once you inculcate this into the educational system, into the child's brain, that things are not opposite. They are not competing, they are complementary. The system of complementarity. Today, if you go through any of the science researchers, whether it is brain science or whether it is quantum mechanics, you find this, the principle of complementarity. The principle of complementarity is what the Eastern civilizations, whether it is Tao or whether it is Shiva Shakti in Indian tradition, this is what has been emphasized here. Today science validates it. We need to take this, and this is going to solve most of the problems.
My name is Arvindan. Just a moment, sorry. Ladies and gentlemen, in the interest of time, we will be entertaining one last question. So I'd also like to request the person asking the last question to keep it short and concise. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have a question from Neelkandan. So, as you mentioned, it is a kind of implicit in the Indian ethos that there should be Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam and different sects or different groups kind of complement each other. But I find that this is not a philosophy which is heard from outside, and the norm in nature is competition. So, do you think adherence to this mindset has caused India throughout the centuries to be kind of passive and accepting of accommodating outside invasions, and therefore as a consequence we see that in general India is in the process of shrinkage. At this time it may have kind of stabilized, but in general there is a constant tendency to lose mind share, let's say. So do you think there is a particular limit at which we should stop being Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, or is there some kind of where do you draw the line basically?
See, I will give you the example of Kabir and Khalsa. Okay. Khalsa protected the nation, and Kabir was for universal acceptance, not tolerance, universal acceptance, with mutual respect. Without Kabir, Khalsa is not possible. It is from Kabir that Khalsa came into being. So, this Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam is not the philosophy of the weak. It is the philosophy that comes from the strength, the inner strength of the nation. And one thing we can be sure, if the humanity is to survive, then it has to embrace this particular vision of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. There is no other way. There is a beautiful book by Carl Sagan, the late astrophysicist, called Dragons of Eden. In that, finally, he tells that the future belongs to those societies which value diversity, which consider the opposing thoughts as equal products of the long chain of evolution. Unless we understand this, unless a society understands this, a society cannot flourish. It will implode and it will destroy itself, and it will also create a lot of harm to the neighbors. And The societies that value diversity, they have to take all measures to stop the expansionist monocultural tendencies within and without. At the same time, we should never lose sight of the fact that the primary concern should be to preserve diversity and pluralism. So, it is both the two sides of the same coin, the Khalsa and the Kabir. That is what we have.
You know, you raised a point that is sometimes, I think, now become a part of our mainstream discourse even in India. That have we been, in some sense, it is a rejectionist idea of our own ethos and culture, that there's a new feeling that we have to be muscular, we have to be monocultural, we have to be aggressive and assertive in order to, say, win this competition. But if you see, you see it even beyond this narrow time frames. Over millennia, there have people who have come here, there have been, humanity has always been a source, there have been constant migrations, there have been constant conflicts, victory losses. But India's largest territory was acquired through peace. And that was in Emperor Ashoka's time. That's the map that is the largest one. Second, look at the resilience of our society, look at the resilience of our culture, that we have not only survived and thrived over all these centuries through what you call defeats and success and things, but also that we have been able to influence others as well. That faiths, that cultures that came to India have also assimilated what was essentially our own, the civilizational ethos of our life. It is because we've always been an open and pluralistic, we've embraced diversity. And I tell you, this is where I think every child and everyone must become a biodiversity specialist. Because if you begin to see biodiversity, you will see the symbiotic, the balance of nature in its diversity. I mean, you know, today, because we are losing biodiversity, stingless bee, for example, all of us eat vanilla ice cream that's made from vanilla. Do you know that stingless bees are slowly vanishing? And therefore, it is the stingless bee which used to pollinate the vanilla plant. And because they are going, human beings have to go and pollinate. Remember what it entails in terms of cost, in terms of damage to environment, in terms of, and therefore slowly vanilla will also go, and your children will stop eating vanilla ice cream. I'm just pointing. You look at a plant. It's a pitcher plant which opens its face and allows a bat, a 4mm bat, to reside inside that pitcher. The droppings of that pitcher plant, of the bat, is the source of nourishment for that plant, because it grows where the soil doesn't provide nourishment. That is the magic of nature, and that is the magic of, and we are part of that. So we have, as Arvind was saying, laid this lesson. Let us not believe. In some senses, we are trying to imbibe that Western materialism also of you know, that we have to have a particular way of life to show success. I think if you look deeply, we have been an extremely successful civilization, and we have continued to exercise influence. We've been extremely resilient only because we have been open, flexible, respectful of pluralism, respectful of diversity, constantly in communication with others around the world. And I think that's the value we must continue to imbibe in ourselves.
I'll just take 2 minutes to appreciate and add on to a little. When we say Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, that Vasudha, the whole world, is one family, there is no other country in the world which has not only given this dictum but also practiced it. Swamiji mentions in Parliament of Religion, also in the very first lecture, that it is the land of India. When the Romans destroyed or were destructing Israel, it is they who came and took shelter in India. The second generation of Prophet came to India. The next generations of Christians came to India and took shelter. The Zoroastrians came from Iran and took shelter in India. India is a land of spirituality on this basis that we embrace everybody. Okay, fine, as you say, that probably we were more generous, that they came and occupied India and politically ruled India. Fine, that's a history. Tell me another country which was ruled by more than 2000 years by foreigners and still have its identity. The very Romans, there was no mightier power than Romans. What is left today except a few broken pillars? They are all part of history, part of museum. India is thriving since last 5,000 years because of this principle that we have adopted, we have accepted everybody. Even if you are my enemy also we accept them. In Hinduism or in Indian ethos, we don't have this concept. If you go a little in details, the stories of Ramayana and Mahabharata, etc. Every demon killed by Rama and Krishna, no demon was killed, assassinated, but he was uplifted. The way this is interpreted, sometimes it's a mythology, it's a story. But there are stories you can keep on telling. Idea is this, that to accept the different cultures, maybe at cost of some part of your culture will be spoiled, but the sustainability increases more. It is something like, I don't understand science also more, but how the resistance increases the power of electricity. This resistance, whatever, whether we invite or whether we accept them, it has increased the sustainability of India. And also this culture, it's not India anymore in political. Those who want to survive for a long, as just now we heard, must accept this dictum, this idea that the whole world is one family. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have gotten a lot of questions here today. But just before we invite our Secretary to give the thank you note, perhaps we'd like to end off on a positive note by just asking what all of us here can do to bring the essence of Swami Vivekananda, his beautiful teachings, to the masses, to the youth, what we can all take away from here and actually impact. So maybe each of the speakers could give a very short phrase, a paragraph on what all of us can do to bring it to the masses.
Unfortunately, we depend more on internet than the books. So probably the first thing which we can do is go to the original literature. Don't go to this duplication of anything. And imbibing Swamiji's teaching is, one thing is to be reminded, and for reminder, it's not only the photograph to be sprayed in WhatsApp, but it is a message which Swamiji says that write down few points and make that your life. We can't follow all the positive ideas. Let few positive ideas guide our life. I think that is the easiest way to take. I take 3 or 4 points and make it, try to practicalize in my life. Thanks.
Swamiji says, take one idea, make it your life, and make it fill you with fire. Take any idea in your life, and make that idea part and parcel of your being, and move towards the unity, the Vedic unity. And it can be anything. It can be an art, or it can be science, or it can be even cooking. And move towards that unity and self-transcendence. There is the only message, Swamiji, that I think will go to each and every person in us and make us feel whole. Thank you.
I'll only say I'll endorse everything that my learned panelists have said. No, seriously, I think I spoke about it. It's basically that in our own lives we just start making little practical differences in terms of how we deal with people, how we deal with ourselves, and what sort of values we imbibe and what we do. And all of this is encompassed in everything that Swami Vivekananda has spoken, written, and lived through himself. So that's what we do. every little difference every day is going to make a big difference to the world. Thank you.
Thank you, speakers. We have now reached the end of our Q&A session, and I now invite the Secretary of the Vivekanada Seva Sangh Singapore to give the thank you note.
We have reached to the end of our very enlightening session, and I'm here to express our gratitude for all the guests and dignitaries and all of you. So first of all, I would like to express our gratitude towards His Excellency, the High Commissioner of India to the Republic of Singapore, Shri Jawed Ashraf ji. I request Swamiji to present a statue of Swami Vivekananda to Jawed ji as a token of appreciation, and they have been helping us throughout this concept to execution of this program, and they have been very helpful to us, the entire High Commission team. Thanks a lot. Similarly, our first speaker who gave an extraordinarily intellectual speech about the science, spirit of science and the Swamiji's thoughts, Shri Arvindan Neelkandan, I would request Swamiji to present a statue of Swami Vivekananda as a token of appreciation. He travelled all the way from India to make his 2 days trip to Singapore to enlighten us all. Thank you. I would request Swamiji, as he has expressed, to felicitate VSS President Shri Bajrang Lalji Sharma. Although Swami Samchittananda is very much part of the entire planning of this program, on behalf of VSS, we would like to express our gratitude and present a small bronze memento for Swamiji. Bajrang ji, please. To make any program a success, we need some sponsors and supporters. So I would like to request Shri Sriramji of Sarvana Bhavan to be felicitated by Bajrang ji with a small statue of Swami Vivekananda. Sriramji, please. Our another sponsor is Sarvananji of Bell Travels. I would like to request him to be felicitated with a small statue of Swami Vivekananda. As we are sitting in this hall, the NTUC Corporation has been very helpful in organizing this program. So we thank NTUC and their entire staff who is working even on Saturday to help this program happen. So thanks a lot. And last but not the least, for all of you to make your Saturday morning spared for this program, thank you. Thanks a lot.
We have now reached the end of this beautiful event. I kindly request all the audience members to remain seated while the honourable guests take their leave. So until then, honourable guests, please make your way to the next event. A round of applause, please.